Ian Kirk, also Fitzgerald, is a fictional character from the Australian soap opera Neighbours, played by Felix Mallard. The character was previously played by Noah Sutherland, Berends and Blake O'Leary. He made his first screen appearance during the episode broadcast on 14 December 2001. Ben is the son of Libby Kennedy, Kym Valentine, and Drew Kirk. Dan Paris. Ben and Libby departed Ramsay Street in 2003, after Libby decided to move to Shepparton with Darren Stark. Todd MacDonald. The family returned briefly in 2004 and in 2007. They returned permanently. Ben departed Neighbours on 2 September 2010. In March 2014, it was announced that Ben would return with Mallard cast in the role. He made his screen return on the 11th of June 2014. The character returned again from the 23rd of July 2015 until the 16th of November before making a permanent return on the 31st of March 2016, moving in with his grandparents. Development. Early life. In 2001, Libby Kennedy, Kym Valentine, gave birth to her and husband, Drew Kirk's Dan Paris, son. The birth placed Libby's life in danger and she was rushed to intensive care with blood loss. Paris said, "All their worst fears are realized. They both knew the birth would be risky for both Libby and the child, and while the baby is all right, Libby is still fighting for her life." Libby makes a recovery and she is allowed to hold her son for the first time. Valentine said, "It's a wonderful moment when Libby holds her newborn baby." Offset. Valentine and Paris both bonded with Noah Sutherland, who played their on-screen baby. Valentine told TV Week that Sutherland was a complete natural, and that she had bonded with him straight away. Paris admitted that he was a little nervous around the baby, saying, "Working with Noah has been quite daunting. It's unfamiliar territory to me." Libby and Drew struggle to name their new son, and after a debate, they decide on Ben. Valentine revealed that she asked the producers to name the baby Ben after a close friend of hers, who had died a few years before. Ben's middle name, Ian, is a tribute to Neighbours writer Ian Kirk. The couple were then seen arguing over Ben's surname, with Libby unconvinced that Ben should be a Kirk. They later decide that he should be Ben K, until they resolve the situation. Return. 2007. Following a brief appearance in 2004, the character and his mother returned permanently in 2007. Blake O'Leary originally auditioned for the role of Mickey Gannon, but his elder brother Fletcher O'Leary was handed the role instead. A few months later, auditions for the character of Ben Kirk came up and O'Leary was cast in the role. Network 10 described Ben as being his mother's biggest supporter and her rock following his father's death. They also say that Ben is a loyal friend. In August 2010, it was announced that O'Leary and Ben would be leaving the show in September. Of the reason for Ben's departure, a spokesperson said, "The Ben character is younger than the other main kids, Sophie and Callum. They are now in high school, but Ben is still in junior school. So it was tricky to come up with storylines which involve all the kids." Return. 2014. On the 11th of March 2014, it was announced that the character would be returning to Neighbours with Felix Mallard in the role. Ben came back to Erinsborough with Libby, and the return coincided with the Kennedy family's 20th anniversary on the show. Mallard said that his first impression of Ben was that he was a pretty chilled-out country sort of kid, and he then comes to Erinsborough and gets into a bit of trouble. Mallard reprised the role in July 2015. And Ben moved in with his grandparents Carl, Alan Fletcher, and Susan Kennedy, Jackie Woodburn, on Ramsay Street. Following several appearances as Ben during 2015, Mallard reprised the role on a permanent basis and Ben returned in March 2016. One of Ben's early storylines upon his 2015 return was dealing with the consequences of sending naked pictures to his ex-girlfriend, Emma. When Ben returned to Erinsborough, he was alone and distressed. Carl and Susan encouraged him to tell them what had happened, and Ben explained that he had broken up with his girlfriend. Ben then begged them to let him move in, as he needed to get away from Ballarat. Ben befriended their neighbour Tyler Brennan, Travis Burns, and they bonded over a dirt bike ride, which ended with Ben telling Tyler that he broke up with Emma as she posted naked pictures of him on her social media. Taylor supported Ben, who became isolated from everyone at Erinsborough High. Susan grew concerned after Ben deleted his social media account and skipped school after receiving a text message from an old friend in Ballarat. Susan started to think that Ben might self-harm and force Tyler to tell her the truth behind Ben's behavior. Ben was humiliated when the pictures were leaked online and his classmates saw them. Susan tried to help Ben find a way to deal with his shame, but it was his teacher Brad Willis, Kip Gamblin, who suggested that he take control of the controversy. Ben filmed himself revealing the history behind the pictures and the guilt and shame he felt about the leak, before showing the video to his classmates. Once Ben had finally adjusted to living in Erinsborough, Carl wanted to bond with his grandson and was pleased when Ben joined him in playing the guitar. Carl believed Ben had inherited his musical talents and suggested they form a band. Ben was secretly appalled by the idea, especially after Carl revealed they would be playing a gig at a local nursing home. Ben did not want to hurt his grandfather's feelings, so he kept quiet as Carl named their band K-Squared. Ben later told Susan that he did not want to be a part of the band and she encouraged him to speak to Carl, but he was worried about breaking his heart. Storylines. After Libby was injured during a bike accident, she was told that she would not be able to carry a child to full term. When Libby does fall pregnant, she decides to keep the baby, despite being told that she could be risking her own life. While attending a rodeo in Oakey, Libby becomes locked in a barn and she goes into labor. She is eventually found by her father, Carl, and husband, Drew Kirk, and airlifted to hospital. Although Libby almost dies, Ben is born safely, but kept in the hospital for a few weeks. After his birth, Ben almost dies when he is locked in Libby and Drew's house while it is being fumigated. Ben is saved by Summer Hoyle and Marissa Siketa, who opens the back door. Libby, Drew and Ben go to visit Drew's father up in Oakey. While out riding, Drew falls from his horse and he dies, leaving Ben without a father. Libby begins a relationship with Darren Stark, Todd MacDonald, and they leave Ramsay Street to live in Shepparton. Libby and Ben return without Darren 3 years later and Libby explains that Darren cheated on her. Darren arrives and tells Susan and Carl that Libby constantly told him that he was not Ben's father. He ends up leaving the street alone. Darren and Libby's split hurt Ben as Darren had been the only father he had known. Libby enrolls Ben at Erinsborough Primary and he becomes friends with neighbour Mickey Gannon, Fletcher O'Leary. Libby meets Daniel Fitzgerald, Brett Tucker, and they will start a relationship. Ben begins to look up to Dan and sees him as a father figure. Libby and Dan marry and Ben is a page boy at their wedding. Libby also finds out she is pregnant and Ben is excited to have a younger brother or sister around. However, Libby loses the baby, which makes Ben sad. Ben starts to feel out of place in his family as he was the only one with a different surname. Libby allows Ben to change his name to Fitzgerald, but this causes friction between Libby and Stephanie Scully. Carla Bonner. Ben tells Steph that he will leave his name the way it is, but Steph realizes that it is none of her business and Ben changes his name. Dan becomes a good stepfather to Ben and he does all the fatherly things with him. Ben and Dan's relationship goes through a rough patch when Dan threatens to hit Ben for misbehaving. Susan agrees to carry Libby and Dan's child and she becomes pregnant. However, she miscarries the baby and Libby has to tell Ben that he would not be a big brother. Libby and Dan decide to separate, leaving Ben without a father figure again. This hurts Ben and he asks Libby and Steph why no one wants him. Steph reassures him that Drew never wanted to leave. Ben continues to have a good relationship with Lucas Fitzgerald, Scott Major. Lucas helps Ben out with school, takes him on his motorbike and helps coach the soccer team. Ben befriends Callum Jones, Morgan Baker, and they, along with Mickey and Charlie Hoyland, Jacob Brito, form a band. Ben becomes friends with Sophie Ramsay, Kaya Jones, too, and they join the soccer team, which is being coached by Andrew Robinson, Jordan Smith, until he is banned from training them. Libby takes over, which embarrasses Ben, as she does not know anything about soccer. Ben decides that he wants to be a dancer, after he gets a lesson from Sophie's sister, Kate Ashley Brewer. Ben is hurt. It emerges Steph is carrying Dan's baby and Libby tried to keep it from him. Libby initially stops Ben from attending Callum's birthday party, but she eventually relents. Ben complains that his teacher will not let him give a speech to the class as she believes that he did not complete an assignment. Ben believes his teacher does not like him. Libby meets with his teacher and she learns that Ben has been writing lots of stories. Libby gets Ben tested as she thinks he is bright, and when he passes the test, he is accepted into an arts school in the country. Ben returns to Erinsborough with his mother when she accepts the role of acting deputy principal at Erinsborough High for 3 weeks. Ben enrolls at the school and befriends Bailey Turner, Kaylin Mackenzie, when he notices he is being bullied by Jaden Walloy, Carn Oxenham. Ben later gets into a fight with Jaden, earning himself a detention from Libby. Jaden blackmails Bailey into lying about what happened and Ben tells Libby that he started the fight. Libby suspends Ben, so Susan gets him a part-time job at the local garden nursery. Ben tells Carl that he is struggling being back in Erinsborough where his father grew up, and wants to leave. Ben eventually tells Libby the truth and he also decides to change his surname back to Kirk. Libby and Ben then leave for Oakey, so Ben can learn more about Drew's roots. The following year, Ben turns up unannounced at Carl and Susan's house. He asks if he can stay with them, as Libby is going to China for work. Ben bonds with Tyler Brennan and reveals that his ex-girlfriend posted his naked photos online, leading to his move to Erinsborough to get away from the negative attention. Ben isolates himself at school and refuses to take part in a social media assignment set by Brad Willis. Ben skips school to hang out with Tyler. He refuses to open up to Carl and Susan when they notice his social media profile has been deleted. Tyler encourages Ben to take part in a school concert and his audition is successful. However, Ben soon learns that the other students have found his naked photos and he pulls out of the concert. Taylor tells Carl the truth about the photos, while Brad persuades Ben to own his mistake. Ben shows the students a video that he has recorded, in which he holds up cards detailing how he was in love and hoped that others would not make the same mistake. Carl suggests that he and Ben form a band called K-Squared and he organizes a gig for them, but Ben does not want to play. Ben spends the day fixing a bike with Tyler and his father Russell Kiefel. They play practical jokes on him, but when Ben pulls Russell's trousers down, Russell loses his temper and threatens him. Carl stops Russell from hurting Ben. Ben befriends Piper Willis, Mavourney Hazel, and helps her to film a segment for her vlog. He accidentally leaves the door to the garage unlocked, leading to the theft of the tools and Tyler's bike. After Libby comes back from China, then goes home. A few weeks later, Ben returns to help out with the protest to save Erinsborough High from closing. Piper berates him for speaking to his ex-girlfriend after everything she did. Piper later apologizes and opens up to Ben about her ex-boyfriend. A fire breaks out at the school and Ben is treated for smoke inhalation. Sheila Canning, Caleb Mann, accidentally reverses her car in Ben, leaving him with broken ribs. After seeing how upset Susan is about the school, Ben admits that he started the fire. Ben and Piper run away together to Glenrowan. They get jobs as fruit pickers to earn money to get to Sydney. But Ben is unable to work when his ribs cause him to collapse in pain. Piper calls a taxi to take him to the local hospital, while her parents and Carl and Susan track them down. Ben then returns to Ballarat. Months later, Ben returns to stay with Carl and Susan. Xanthi Canning, Lily van der Meer, is instantly attracted to Ben. She invites herself over to the Kennedys to spend time with Ben, and they drink some alcohol. Xanthi gets tipsy and is sick on Susan, who tells Ben not to spend time with Xanthi. The following day, Xanthi apologizes to Ben and tries to make it up to him by arranging a meet-and-greet with Angus Young at Lassiter's hotel. This turns out to be a ruse so they can spend time together, and they are briefly trapped in the hotel following an explosion, during which they find money belonging to Tom Quill. Kane Felsinger. Xanthi persuades Ben to take the money as Tom is believed to have been killed in the explosion, but he later turns up alive. The theft of the money is discovered by Piper and Angus Beaumont Hannay, Jai Whiteford, who steals Ben's share. When Tom demands his money back, Ben, Xanthi and Angus sell old clothes and busk to raise the amount. Ben believes that Carl and Susan are favoring Angus over him, and when Angus goes unpunished for spraying graffiti at the school, this makes him more angry, which leads to a fight between them. Ben learns Angus's mother, Sarah Beaumont, Nicola Charles, has cancer and is asked not to tell Angus. However, he confides in Xanthi, who tells him. Angus runs away and takes the busking money. Ben and Xanthi find him at off-air and they try and persuade him to return. Ben takes Angus's passport, so he cannot leave the country. Reception. For his portrayal of Ben, O'Leary was nominated for Best Young Actor at the 2009 Inside Soap Awards. A writer for the BBC said Ben's most notable moment was almost being born in a barn. Quote, "The character of Ben has been received negatively by Ruth Deller of television website Low Culture. She said, 'It's hard to believe something so evil as the child of Drew. One can only assume his father's horse-related death traumatized the child terribly, as otherwise there is no excuse for the brat whining.' Hopefully there'll be some sort of Ben gets redeemed storyline, because right now, he's fast threatening to overtake Hannah Button Martin as the most irritating child to ever hit Ramsay Street." Deller has further commented on Ben, stating, "Ben has long been a contender for the most annoying child in Erinsborough award. He's been acting like a 3-year-old despite being about 10, putting on cutesy voices when making shite presents for the baby. But worst of all, he idolizes Fitzy, who isn't even the good Fitzgerald brother, and wants to get rid of the saintly Drew's surname, who, despite being long dead, any normal child would surely prefer to be named after." Quote, in June 2014, Kerry Barrett from All About Soap was pleased to see Ben and Libby return, but could not help noticing that Ben's attitude. Barrett commented, "Maybe it was just his teenage moodiness, but he didn't seem overexcited to be back in Ramsay Street." She thought that it must have been difficult for Ben being back in the town where he was born and his father lived. Barrett added, "We don't reckon he's happy about being back in Erinsborough. But the question is, will he tell Libby what he thinks?" Quote, references, external links. Ben Kirk at the official Neighbours website.